Section 14 of American Big Game Hunting, a collection of stories by the Boone and Crockett Club. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Section 14. Nights with the Grizzlies by W.D. Pickett. In this paper, I propose to give an account of some of the experience with the grizzly bear in the summer and fall of 1885. Here, let me correct some impressions prevailing among sportsmen from the East as to the proper time to hunt this animal. As detailed in the sporting papers, one sportsman hunting late in the fall finds them at timberline, and having some success in basing his opinion upon statements of his guide, is satisfied that the only place to find them, and you must stealthily follow the trail through dense timber as he did. Another sportsman finds them below the foothills among the badlands, and thinks that is the proper locality. And so each one is governed by his own particular good luck and experience. This reminds me of the heated controversy that agitated some of the readers of one of the sporting papers a few years since as to the color of the jackrabbit of the plains, one party contending that they were gray, and the opposing party that they were white, each party citing his own restricted experience with the fleet-footed animal. To those having more extended observation, it was plain that each side was to a certain extent right as well as wrong, for it is well known that the jackrabbit is gray during the summer and fall, and turns white in the winter, and then again sheds his white coat in the spring. At least this is the case in Wyoming and Montana. So with the grizzly. He is essentially an omnivorous animal, his food varying with each season and the locality where such food is obtained. His habitat varies accordingly. He lies in his winter bed until routed out by the melting of the winter's snow, and the ground being still frozen, he has to rustle for his grub. He soon becomes poor from the necessity of much traveling around for old carcasses and whatever food comes handy. He is then usually in the foothills. In the summer, his food is more vegetable, grass, roots, plants, etc. His haunt is then on the highest mountain plateaus, where he does a great deal of rooting in a certain kind of loose rock and loam. In the last of summer, berries are ripe, and he's then found below the foothills and in the badlands, or wherever chokeberries, plums, bullberries, etc. are found. In the fall, he craves animal food, and is then found high up in the foothills or again in the mountain plateaus, wherever game is most abundant. And in November and December, he seeks his winter quarters. These remarks do not apply to the grizzly bears that are found in the badlands, bordering the Missouri or the lower Yellowstone, as they live there the entire year, holing up in winter in the bluffs of those desolate-looking regions. The intellect and intelligence of the grizzly bear are not fully appreciated. Strip him of his hide, stand him erect on his hind feet, stick a plug hat on his upper end, and he resembles in anatomy and general appearance that of the noblest work of God. Man. A little too long-bodied, neck a little short, but otherwise, looking at the muscles of his thighs and forearm, a veritable athlete. Reclothe him in his fur, place him on his all fours, and watch him rooting around for grubs and worms and carrion, and wallowing in mud and filth, and he resembles in apparent stupidity and habits the lowest type of animal, the hog. Yet those well acquainted with his characteristics will, I think, agree with me that in intelligence, and perhaps even in intellect, he is not many grades in the process of evolution below man. About the middle of July, 1885, word reached me that there was considerable sign of bear rooting on some high mountain plateaus not many days' travel by pack train from my ranch. Taking a pack outfit, including my fur-lined sleeping bag, a good mountain man, and a lad of 15 to take care of camping the horses and enough grub for a few days, we reached the locality, after a hard climb, about noon on the 18th of July. We made camp at about 8,500 feet elevation on the head of one of the forks of the Four Bear Creek, having to pack wood up from below for making coffee. We struck out after lunch up the gulch, and after going a few miles, discovered a grizzly rooting among the rocks, well up to its head near the summit of the range, which is here between 10,000 and 11,000 feet elevation. A reconnaissance indicated that the only chance to approach him to windward was by crossing the mountain to the right into the valley of another fork of Four Bear Creek. Accordingly, we climbed over the mountain divide and were making along its opposite slope, when just in our front, about a mile off, near the head of the gulch on the right, was discovered another grizzly rooting. It was agreed that I was to have the shot, and it became necessary to leave my horse and dogs back with the men. I took it afoot. A little study of the ground showed that in order to approach him successfully, it was necessary to descend to the bottom of the gorge on the right, and to ascend along its bed. This I proceeded to do. Just before reaching the bed of the gorge, I was exposed to view, and was walking fast or running to get the advantage of its friendly cover. When within about 50 yards of the bottom, and with my attention directed to the bear about half a mile away, a large grizzly forced himself on my attention by rising from his bed in the bottom of the gulch. Walking slowly away, he commenced ascending diagonally the opposite and steep side of the gorge. The old rascal, during the heat of the day, had dug a resting place in the cool bed of the branch, was taking a siesta, and evidently resented being disturbed. From the sullen way in which he made off, occasionally looking back, I felt he was going to be ugly. Quicker than it takes to write it, I had 2 cartridges in my right hand, which, with the one in the rifle, were thought sufficient, for at that time the size of the beast was not realized. The cartridge in the rifle was a 110 270 grain express, and those in the hand 110 270 grain and 110 340 grain respectively, all express balls. While making these preparations, the bear, going diagonally up the side of the gulch, had disappeared behind a huge conglomerate boulder that overhung the stream. Seeing he must soon emerge, I dropped on my right knee and stood ready to fire at the first favorable opportunity. In a moment he emerged from behind the boulder, walked up a short distance, stopped and looked back, exposing his left side to rather more than a quartering shot. Aim was quickly taken for his heart. A report followed, and the little express ball did its work well. It broke 2 ribs, 3 or 4 large fragments entered the heart, and the balance of the splinters scattered through his lungs. Making but little noise when hit, an ugly sigh, he, as the species of bear almost always does under like circumstances, tucked his head between his hind legs and rolled down into the gulch, using his forelegs for guides. He came up with a bounce, was on his feet in a moment, and making a rush straight for me. I had loaded in a jiffy with the other 110 270 grain cartridge, but waited a moment until he commenced ascending my side of the gulch, hoping it was a good shot to roll him back. Crossing rapidly the bed of the gulch, he was in a moment ascending toward me, and when within about 30 yards, he was originally about 70 yards at first fire, I fired at his front, hitting at the point of the right shoulder, shattering the socket joint and that bone halfway to the elbow. He did not roll back, but was demoralized and sickened, and had not the sand to come further, but changing his direction to the left about 45 degrees, passed within 20 yards of my right front. I was loaded and ready for another shot as he passed. He appeared so near done for, however, that I hesitated to fire, wishing to have some practice on him for my 2 young dogs, Bob and Snip, which had never seen a live bear. He, however, seemed, after passing, to mend his licks so fast that I feared he would give trouble in dispatching him, so I ran rapidly after him, he in the meantime having partially disappeared under the bank, and when within 15 or 20 yards he turned at bay, facing me. Before he could charge, if such was his aim, the 110 340 grain cartridge was delivered into the side of his neck within the collarbone, making a fearful wound and rolling him down into the gulch, where he soon died. It was only after my man had come up and the bear had been rolled over that his dimensions and the danger I escaped by the little ball doing such execution at the socket joint were realized. Had it struck an inch and a half to the left, he would have been on me in a few more jumps, and though another shot would have been given, I think, unless it had been a paralyzing shot in the brain or the spinal column, he could have so torn and lacerated me as to make death preferable. I have been in a half-dozen scrapes of more or less danger with these bears, but have never lost my presence of mind until they were dead, and the danger passed through realized. I have always determined never to run, but to face them and fire away, believing that the least sign of fear gives any animal additional courage. I had an adventure similar to this with a she-bear that had been approached within 57 yards. It was a bright moonlight night, and her cub was squalling in a beaver trap by her side. A good shot was delivered over the heart. 3 shots were discharged as she rushed forward, first by myself, then one from LaCory, who was backing me, and then another by myself, and when the racket was over, the bear was lying dead 12 yards from us. All these shots were bullseye and deadly. In this case, I could not have run had the spirit moved me, as from a serious accident I had been on crutches or on my back for 24 days, and hobbled up the mountain in this instance with the help of a crutch and a stick, Lee carrying my rifle. A familiarity with all the breech actions of the day, together with an extended experience with the Sharp system, had convinced me that the latter system, in safety, facility, and rapidity of manipulation, is not equaled by any. Take the next best, the double-barreled rifle. Only 2 shots could have been delivered in the 2 before described adventures. I have never had sufficient confidence in any of the repeating rifles to use them against dangerous game, when so much better could be had. Their want of power, their facility for getting out of order at the wrong time, especially when rapidly manipulated, combined with the fact that the rapidity of fire is very little greater than a system like the Sharps, are the considerations that have influenced me. In my opinion, there has not yet been invented a repeating apparatus that is equal, under all circumstances, to the human hands in connection with a good breech system. A better idea of these bears can be had from measurements than from weight. The first bear alluded to was a very large one among 3 of the largest ever killed by me, and judging by one killed and weighed subsequently, he probably weighed 600 pounds, though not fat. His length, as he would have stood, was 6 feet 10 inches. Measurements showed that he could have stood erect on his hind feet to the height of 8 feet. His head was 18 inches long by 12 inches wide. His hind foot was 11.5 inches by 6 inches. 4 foot without the toes, 7 by 6 inches. His forearm, after being skinned, measured 18 inches around. His skull, which is preserved, 15 7/8 inches by 9 inches. The tusks projected from the gums, 1 5/8 inches. With the .45 caliber rifle used, I have killed nearly 40 bears, all with the exception of this one, with the .340 grain express ball. This .270 grain express bullet was a .44 caliber used for several years on deer from a .44 caliber rifle. It did very good work in this instance, but for a large bear, the heavier ball is preferable. The .270 grain ball flies remarkably true for its weight. In the process of skinning the bear, it was found that this was not the first encounter he had with mankind. In the muscles of the neck, and on the right foreleg above the elbow and next to the bone, were found 4 rifle balls and a large fragment of another ball. The wounds had healed up, and each ball was enclosed in a sack with the appearance of having been there several years. One .42 caliber 205 grain lead ball lay in the muscles of his neck, another of same caliber and weight, 250 caliber 375 grain lead balls, and the large flattened fragments of a ball were the muscles of one foreleg next to the bone. The .42 caliber balls I judged were fired from a '66 model 44 caliber Winchester, and as all the balls were a little battered and did not shatter the bone, they must have been fired from a rimfire cartridge. All the balls were cannellored. The bear I was after when this one stumbled on took to his heels and disappeared rapidly over the mountain after the second shot. We went for the first one seen, but the dogs getting wind of him, and having a taste of bear's blood, ignominiously broke and stirred him up. We chased him on horseback and afoot for 3/4 of a mile, but did not get near enough to get an effectual shot. The dogs, that had never before chased a live bear, could run alongside of him, but did not take hold. Probably you or I would have done the same thing under the circumstances. Haying time cut short this hunt. A short time afterward, one of my neighbors complained of the depredations of bears among his thoroughbred cattle, having recently lost 2 yearlings. I suggested that if he would furnish the medicine in the shape of a carcass, a repetition of such business might be stopped. He agreed, and I at once reconnoitered the locality and selected a point in the valley of a small mountain stream, where he promptly had the carcass planted. An almost daily inspection was made of the medicine, but not until the morning of the 7th day were there any indications of it being disturbed. Promptly on hand at 5 o'clock that evening, I was rather incautiously approaching, under cover of a slight rise of ground in the sagebush, and had gotten within 150 yards when a dark object that to my startled imagination appeared 10 feet high and proportionately broad appeared to rise out of the earth. Recognizing the situation at once, I rose up offhand and pulled, but the firing pin failed. This had never before happened under such circumstances, and only half a dozen times in the rifle's history, for want of attention to the firing bolt. The bear gave me time to cock and fire, but as no answering ball came, the shot was evidently a miss, resulting from my being put out by the previous mishap. He was rapidly followed to the edge of the willow swamp, about 150 yards, through which the trail passed, where he was seen, evidently unwilling to forego his evening meal. He quickly sat up, made me out, and at once disappeared before a shot could be delivered. I gave him up for the time, very much discouraged at failing to bag such a large grizzly. He was evidently a boar, and certainly was not much scared, and from his size and actions, I was satisfied he was the one that had stolen my neighbor's yearlings. The next evening, August 17th, I was on hand early, but, acting on previous experience, took a different position on his trail 100 yards from the medicine. The direction of the wind forced me to take position with my back to the brush from which the bear would probably appear. This did not suit me. On first arriving on the ground, a dark object came rapidly down the mountainside, about 1 mile up the valley, through an opening. This evidently was a bear, though not apparently as large as my friend of the evening before, and I felt sure he would make his appearance, did he not take the alarm. Lying down, protected by some sagebrush, I waited patiently until the gray dusk of approaching twilight, but no bear appeared on the scene. Can you recall your feelings when, as a boy, you passed through the graveyard at the hour of dusk, thinking with the poet, "'Tis now the very witching time of night, when churchyards yawn, and hell itself breathes out contagion to this world." With what superstitious dread you looked cautiously around, expecting a hobgoblin at any moment to rise out of the ground. How every noise, the crackling of a twig, startled you, so it is with me when watching on the trail of this bear at such an hour. When occasion requires it, his movement is as stealthy and noiseless as a cat's. You hear the rolling of a boulder up the mountainside in the timber several 100 yards away. You know it must be done by some large animal, and you suspect a bear. Presently the same noise, now closer, and all your faculties are all on the qui-vive, and you are at every moment expecting his appearance. You wait what, to the excited senses, appears a long time. What has become of him? It was, perhaps, a false alarm, and you're discouraged, when presently there he stands, apparently right on you, and seemingly risen out of the ground. So it was on this occasion, as I lay in the open about 30 feet from the thicket, in a prone position on the grass, clothed in soiled buckskin, with 3 cartridges in left hand and finger on the trigger, ready to rise into a sitting position and deliver fire. Hark! The crackling of brush almost behind me. In a moment of intense interest, for I don't know where he will appear, my attention is kept constantly to the rear and the left rear. No more noise. What has become of him? It is getting very dark, and maybe it was a mistake. Presently, there, right on me apparently, but really 50 yards to the left rear, stands a black mass that must be the bear. I rise cautiously to a sitting position, and as he stands looking wistfully up toward the old horse, I pull away at his side. The report is followed by a suppressed bawl, and he rolls over. I'm loaded in a moment and waiting to see if he regains his feet. He does not, and it's unnecessary to fire. I walk up to him with finger on the trigger at a ready, but the death rattle is in his throat, and another shot is unnecessary. He turns out to be a black bear with a very black coat, and pretty well furred. He's dressed as quickly as possible, for it is now dark, and quite 6 miles to quarters, over a trailless mountain. A walk of half a mile to my horse, Pike, and then as rapid a ride home as circumstances will admit, wind up the evening's adventures. I'm well satisfied, but know I have not yet gotten the right one, or the calf killer. Rush skins and attends to the hide the next morning, and before sundown I'm again on hand. The old horse is fast disappearing, and it is desirable to lose no time. Position is taken this time a little nearer to the trail, and coming out from the willow brush, It passes for 20 or 30 yards through a marsh that's screened to some extent by scattering willows on the near side. And my position enables me to see, through the willows, a portion of the trail over which the bear will probably come. Late in the afternoon, a storm has passed around the mountains, and a strong and favorable wind was blowing. Lying prone among the sagebrush in a position favorable for observation, with everything at a ready, I wait patiently. Sundown comes. The mountain to the west casts its shadows around. It becomes quite dusky, so much so that I experiment as to whether the foresight can be seen, otherwise a wad of white paper must be tied over the front sight. This is as yet unnecessary. It's now the witching time when the bear likes to prowl around. The senses are all on the strain as they're directed to the left rear. Just then a dark moving mass flits by between the willows on the trail, and soon emerges in full view, but again to disappear in a slight depression passed by the trail. Heavens! What a monster he seems in the dim twilight. As soon as he disappears, I move rapidly and noiselessly forward to within about 50 yards of the trail he has to pass, drop on the right knee, and I'm ready. He does not come to time, however, and has evidently stopped to listen, doubtless remembering the first evening's experience, and being in hearing of last evening's racket. Has he taken the alarm and gone back? When on the point of going to the left, peering over and taking a chance shot on the run, his back appears over the sagebrush and he's moving confidently forward, having satisfied himself there's no danger. At the first favorable opportunity, he passes through the sagebrush. I deliver fire into his side, a little too high, and he rolls over, but with such a ball as to indicate he's dangerous. Did he know from what direction came the shot? He is soon on his feet, going back on the trail toward the swamp. Loading quickly, I run forward to intercept him, and find him after stumbling along 40 or 50 yards, in a sitting position near the end of the marsh, evidently nearly done for, with his back toward me. A moment's interval was sufficient to place a ball in the back of his head. He rolls over and is soon dead. A hasty examination showed him to be a large bear, and the handsomest and most symmetrically formed I've ever killed. He was in just the proper flesh for activity and business, though not quite as large as the big bear killed on the Big Bear Fork of the Four Bear Creek, heretofore described. Before proceeding to disembowel him, I did what had always been done under like circumstances, that is, placed the loaded rifle convenient for instant use. Something whispered this caution, especially now, as it was a time when another bear might appear on the trail at any moment. Keeping my eyes as much as possible at the point on the opposite side of the marsh where the trail debouched onto it, I had proceeded to rip the carcass from the throat to the pelvis and had my hands already messed up in a mass of liver, paunch, express balls, etc., when my attention was drawn to a dark mass at that point, and in a moment my rifle was in hand ready for the emergency. By the time I was ready to fire, he had discovered something unusual in his front, and had sat up to make me out. Before doing so, aim had been quickly taken at his brisket, and at the report he had tumbled over, the ball striking the left side, fragments penetrating the heart. Judging from his boldness in stumbling onto me not more than 15 minutes after my last shot, I expected that he would show fight, but instead he made back on his trail as fast as his condition would allow. From previous experience, in just such circumstances, the necessity was at once recognized of a cautious but vigorous pursuit, if he was to be secured before hiding in the brush, and without hesitation I plunged through the marsh, half knee-deep in mud and water, and entered the narrow trail on the opposite side. Pursuing it rapidly for 30 or 40 yards to where it passed through a little opening, there, within 10 steps of me, was a dark mass, breathing heavily and lying partially behind a small clump of willows. Putting a telling shot through the center of the mass, he appeared to wake up, and gave an exhibition of some of the grandest ground and lofty tumbling, at one time appearing to stand up on his head, and kicking with his hind feet 10 feet straight into the air. As he did not get upon his feet again, another shot was unnecessary, but he soon settled down and was dead. This bear was as large from tip to tip as he of the Big Bear Fork, but not as fat nor as large-bodied. In fact, not as heavy as the one just killed. Neither of these bears, I think, needed a second shot, and undisturbed, would not have gotten on their feet again. A dense thicket was near, and they might have scrambled into its cover and have been lost, so another shot was given. At any rate, Darkness was at hand by the time the carcasses were dressed, and a dense fog was settling over the mountain that had to be crossed. The exhilaration of spirits from the killing of two such large bears on the same evening, one of them the bear that I was after, caused me to forget fatigue and fog, and with a light heart Pike was mounted, and the mountain ascended. A thick fog soon enveloped us, so that nothing could be seen beyond 100 feet. Pike and I soon disagreed as to the direction, but I insisted on my way. After going a half-mile and getting into some rough ground, it was evident that I was wrong and completely befogged. The rein was then given to Pike, and he turned squarely to the left, and having gone 600 yards over some pretty rough ground, he came to the head of the game trail leading down the mountain, in which we had several times traveled. Pike had his way the balance of the ride, and after passing across the drainage for 2 miles, we got below the fog, and by 10 o'clock we were once more at home. As an indication of the labor usually undergone in hunting this bear, it is stated that 75 miles were traveled, one half of which was in the night, before the first shot, and 105 miles before killing the 3. I have since traveled more than 100 miles after a special bear, and was repaid by only 1 shot at long range, and no bear. The next day, Rush and McDevitt skinned and packed in the hides and fat of the 2 grizzlies. The weighing apparatus was taken along, and the calf killer was found to weigh 405 pounds after being dressed 16 hours, the other something less. The black bear was not weighed, but it is presumed he weighed about the average of the species, 175 pounds in life. The rifle employed is the same used for several years, a .45 caliber Sharps, with which I have killed 38 of these bears, of which number 22 were killed with a single shot each, using 110 grain C&H number 6 and a 340 grain express ball. As I before stated, the rise of its trajectory is 7.01 inches in 200 yards, an average of about 20 shots through a trajectory range. Previously, I had used a .44 caliber Sharps with a bottleneck shell holding 100 to 105 grains of the same powder with which a good many bears had been killed. No especial ball had been determined on as the best for bear and elk and sheep. With exceptional opportunities for several years past among all our big game, together with a careful study of the subject based on a dissection of wounds made by different combinations of powder and ball, I think the 2 7/8 .45 caliber shell with 110 grains strong powder and a 340 grain express ball such as I use, the most destructive charge in all American rifles for bear, elk, and sheep. A little lighter ball might answer perhaps, but I'm not sure. The amount of powder would not be sufficient for a heavier one for best results. The best results not only depend on the relative proportion of powder and ball, but also on the diameter and depth of the hole and the point of ball. If the walls around the hole are too thin, they will break off too soon or in too fine pieces. If the walls are too thick, they may not disintegrate until the ball's velocity has been so much retarded that the particles will not have velocity to make their own way, but will follow the channel made by the butt, so that a good many considerations enter into the problem. The ball in question, shot directly into a bear, elk, sheep, etc., will, after passing through the skin, break up, usually tearing a hole through the ribs, even of a fat animal, through which the unclenched hand may be passed, the fragments scattering in a cone shape, the larger fragments penetrating to the opposite ribs. In this way, the whole momentum of the ball is expended on the vitals, the heart and lungs. Hit further back, it breaks up into still smaller fragments, making a terrible wound in the paunch and the entrails that none of those animals can long survive. I have never known it to fail in breaking the large bones of the largest bear or elk when coming in contact with them. For deer and antelope, my .40 caliber is found sufficient, using 100 grains of strong powder and a particular express ball of 270 grains. It makes about a 6.5 inch curve in 200 yards, and the ball flies very true. I use also in the .45 caliber the .44 caliber ball, before alluded to, using 3 thicknesses of patch paper. It flies remarkably true for its weight. It makes a 6.34 inch curve per 200 yards, with 110 grains C&H number 6. I failed to say at the proper place that the degree of hardness or percent of alloy has a great deal to do with the execution, as well as accuracy of flight of the express ball. When of pure lead they break up too soon. nor have I ever known a reasonable degree of accuracy obtained with any lead ball with a comparatively large charge beyond 50 or 75 yards. They are knocked out of proper shape by the time they leave the muzzle. This want of accuracy has been observed with the best English express rifles with light leaden balls. I find in my experience with the balls of my preference as above that from 5% for the heavier ball to 8% for the lighter is best. A 20-bore double-barreled shotgun made by Bland & Sons of London, chambered for the Kynoch brass shells, for ducks, several species of grouse, jackrabbits, magpies, skunks, etc., completes my battery. I value the latter very highly for its executive ability, combined with a weight of only 6 pounds. I have written much in detail, because I think it is the details that make the account of hunting trips interesting. I hope its perusal may interest readers as much as the recalling of its incidents has interested me. I have made several mentions of Four Bear Creek. The name was given it for want of a better one by the United States land surveyors, who happened to be in camp on Hell-Roaring River, near the creek's mouth, on the night in which I killed 4 bears, the last about 9 o'clock at night. End of section 14.